know that there has had to have been some sacrifice, whether it's time or nutrition or whatever it is.
Recording of myself talking about having a relationship with my chest.
I'm Ben Canning.
I'm Dave Kennedy.
And this is Hacking Health Podcast.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hacking Your Health Podcast. I just got you off guard.
Well, what episode is it? What? Tell everybody what episode it is.
I don't know what episode it is. I literally just stuck my hand told me here.
Totally fucked me on that one.
Hey, look on YouTube if you see that Ben's reaction is priceless. That was off the cuff. That was great.
Well, it's episode 149. Thanks for the intro. You gonna ask me what I do first time, or just do this whole thing backwards?
Today, this is the flip the script episode. I just came up off the cuff. So, Ben, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. I feel a little bit under pressure. I'm not used to this setup, but no, things are good. A bit of a life update from me. In the past week, since we recorded the podcast, went to Limp Bizkit concert. If you ever have the opportunity to go to Limp Bizkit concert, please, I would so recommend. I don't know whether it's like a nostalgia thing for me, but I was like, my 15-year-old self was at that concert and it was fucking awesome. They were class. I then had a quick trip that I couldn't speak about before because it was out for Randy's surprise birthday. So he had a surprise 50th birthday in Portland, and his mom had reached out to me a couple of months ago, seeing if I could come out and bring a couple of the team from We Hack Health. So a few of us went out: myself, Justin, Mike, Todd, and who else was there? Literally spent Andres, who was hilarious the whole time. So yeah, the four of us went out and surprised Randy. Now, it was a surprise party, and there was a lot of things going into it that I was like, Randy's not going to be an easy person to surprise. Like, I was thinking about the cameras at his house and all this sort of stuff, but his mum had taken care of the whole thing, his mum and his daughter. So he was more than shocked that we had come out, but it was cool. It was cool to hang out. It was good to be there. Good to see him in his own space and good to hang out on Sunday. Flew back on Monday, and today is, Wednesday. So we've had a lot of shit going on, but yeah, it's been a good week.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's been a great week myself. This is another week of no travel, which has been absolutely fantastic. So I haven't had to travel anywhere, which means I have no excuse to not go in and get some amazing lifts in. For some reason, I don't know why this is, but the programming that you have me on now, it causes my legs to like die for like days. So like I'm walking, like it's become a joke in the office. They're like, legs day. I'm like, that was 3 days ago and I'm still walking like this. So
it's working. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I'm gonna stop walking. The DOMS that I'm getting, the delayed onset muscle soreness, is definitely at a whole new height with this training block, which is great, and it's crazy because it's like half of what I did before, but yet more efficient at what we're doing, which we'll talk a little bit about. But the training's been going great. I was at airsoft yesterday, and of course, it was like 97 degrees out, and it was humid, and it was like the hottest I've ever been probably in my entire life. Like, I'm sitting there, and luckily later at night it cooled down a little bit, but I'm sitting there, I am completely like, if you looked at me, you would have thought that I went through a complete shower or just dunked in a bath. My whole clothes are soaked. My armor's all soaked, like the chest pad that I have and everything. And so I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I am hot. Like, and it was like my head is pulsating, and of course I got to run and, shoot at these like 15-year-old kids. I mean, you gotta impress, when you're going out there. So, that didn't slow me back, but it's funny. My ultra human ring, I was there for 5 hours. Said I burned 2,715 calories in that 5 hour period, which,
so the additional 400 calories that I give you didn't even touch the sides.
Which is why probably my check-in photos today looked amazing. Like, my check-in photos today, I'm like, oh my God, like I look like Arnold. This looks great. Like these are the best check-in photos ever. In like 1 week, I'm completely dehydrated. Like, I can't get enough drinks in me. Like, I've been pounding like Gatorade Zeros and, like drinks, and I can't get enough drinks in me. So, so needless to say, what I'm going to start doing is dehydrate myself the night before check-ins to get better check-in results, for the pictures. But
that's actually a tactic that you use coming into a photo shoot. You have like a couple of drinks the night before, because usually you're dehydrated in the morning. Now, I'm not saying go out and get absolutely smashed, but generally the thing to go to is like a couple of glasses of like dry white wine, and it really absorbs any sort of moisture and leaves you dehydrated in the morning. So
So what he's
I'm not saying every no. Just need to clarify that saying you're not to drink 2 glasses of white wine every Tuesday night before you take your check-in photos. That's not what I'm saying.
Well, it was cool today. I was reflecting back, and I did a post on this, just kind of my journey, and so I think I went with you. My first check-in week was June of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. It was either May or June of 2020. I'm pretty sure it was June.
Exactly. You can continue with your story. I'll get the facts right here. 1 sec.
Sounds good. So I was looking back at the photos, and first of all, my back photos looked amazing. Like, I'm just saying, like, my back was popped out, and I couldn't even wait for check-in. I just sent the pictures to Ben first.
I know. Spoiler alert. Cut them the day off.
Yeah. And then, of course, I had a post about it because they were like amazing check-in photos. But, I went back and reflected. What was the date?
9th of September. No, yeah, 9th of September, yeah. So first week of September.
How did I get those dates wrong then? 2010?
2020.
Or 2020, that's what I meant. Sorry,
yes, 2020, yeah. You got the year right, but 9th of September was the day one. That is the day one in your day one, week one check-in sheet.
So I went off the date of when the photo was what it said was on Google Docs. Yeah. So it messed up. So my bad. But anyways, so so we're looking at less than 4 years, about 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. And the progress photos are just absolutely amazing from before and after, which is going to allow us to talk about a little bit what we're talking about today of tracking progress. But I was just really blown away with the photos themselves. One update today, honestly, was the most perfect Orange Theory day. So like, if you could picture like running for 23 minutes straight, does that sound like fun to you? Like, especially like sprinting and things, it's not like fun, right? That's not fun. Mm-mm. However, what about like 10, 30-second sprints?
Nope.
No, that's not bad.
I'm not interested in that either.
That's not bad.
I actually have a story about running that I'll let you finish after Orange Theory.
So it was like 10, 30-second sprints. Like, this is my jam, right? Like my heart rate doesn't even get to like zone 3 or 4 in this. I'm just like, and so what I did was we had 10 sprints. Okay. And so I started at a 1 and then I went up 2 every time. So it was like 1, 2, 4, 8, 10, 12, 14, and then I went to 15. So I was elevation. So at the end of it, I was at 12 miles per hour at 15 elevation. I must have looked like a friggin' idiot, because like I'm like pounding my legs like as short as I can. I'm trying to run, 12 miles per hour at a 15% incline. And the thing's like all the way up like this, but that's my type of jam. Like I could do that sprints all day long, no issue, right? And then when you get to the gym part, it was all arms. I'm like,
nice. Yeah, I'm in for that
type of day. So I was, doing lat raises, some shoulder presses, some bicep curls, some triceps. Then you need to do like 20 things in the row, which is a nice little break or pause in between. Go back and do the same thing. So, today was one of the best Orange Theory days ever, which is great.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I was running this morning myself. So I will say,
you're doing this crazy thing, right? Why are you running?
Let me tell the fucking story. So
I was totally caught off guard right here.
Good. Nobody knows what's going on in this episode. Good. We're in. So it was Harper's sports day. It was Harper's very first sports day. So she had a relay race, an egg and spoon race, race with a beanbag on her head. Now she's 4 for anybody who's listening and thinks I'm crazy. And then a race with a cowboy hat on and an inflatable horse. And then she finished up and they were like, right, parents race. And I was like, I thought this was a joke. So anyway, they pulled all the mums first and I was like, okay, cool. Maybe it's just a mum thing. And then they pulled the dads. I will say there was a notable change in atmosphere when the dads lined up for their race. I was like, it's on. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows what my job is. I was like, I can't, like, they just assume because I'm a coach that I am also a runner. I was like, are we not doing like 1 rep max deadlifts or something? Because I'm in for that. But Harper came over and she was like, give me a pep talk. And then they came. And I will say, I can't run for a long distance, but over like 20 meters, I'm fast as fuck. So long story short, I won an actual race this morning and Harper was very proud of me. And I will say to any dads listening, please train for these things. Like, don't be a disappointment to your children and losing the fucking race, because I was all in for it. Like, it was like it could have gotten. No, you can't not do that. Like, that is like, especially it was her first sports day, so she will always remember that I won the race. I'm in training for next year already.
You may have already changed your life too. Like, hey, if you put your mind to something, anything's possible, right?
Exactly. And I will say I was wearing Vans as well. That is the secret too.
Vans and running does not sound like a good time to me. Just throwing that out there.
I won. So
that's all that matters. Yeah.
That is literally all that matters.
That's hilarious. Well, congratulations for running.
I didn't get a medal though. I was like, they were doing like the graduation at the end. They were giving me the medal. So I was like, what?
How long of a run was it?
Like literally 20 meters. Like it was not far at all. Put it like this: the 4-year-olds had just ran it. So
Got it. Okay. So it wasn't like a marathon or, but still, I mean, you still.
no, it doesn't matter how long it was. I won. That's all that matters.
I'll tell you something. Like just from like the fitness perspective, like your perspective of things changes too. Like the other day, it was yesterday. My buddy that I met from Airsoft, he has his own business of doing like auto detailing for cars. So he details a car. Well, Aaron was busy out and about with errands and stuff like that, and so I didn't have a car to. So I had to basically take the car, drop it off, and then come back. Well, it was only 2 miles from my house, so I was like, well, that's no big deal. So I just took my car, dropped it off, and then I sprinted back for 2 miles. Made it back home, easy peasy. It was like 95 degrees out. I was like drenched in sweat, but I wasn't. That was fine. I was just like this. That was no big deal. And then changed my clothes, went to work, and everything was good. So it's awesome to be able to do those types of things and have the perspective of that. But I will say being fit in airsoft also helps out a ton as well, because I literally clenched. So just want to tell you one last story here. So it's we're playing this game called Escort the President. Okay.
Right.
And so there's a guy that has a riot shield, and he is escorting the president, which is a ref. Okay, the ref is the president. Poor refs get shot to hell in this match, which is great. I like shooting them. But you have to basically escort the president. There's a second story building called 2-story, and in the back there's this yellow room, which is where you escort the president out for a helicopter extraction. So they're simulating a crash airplane, and you're protecting the president and get them escorted out of some situation or zone or whatever. Okay. So, we start off at 2 different parts of the map, and, the whole purpose is to stay close together. And you have, normally you can do what's called a respawn. So you die, you go and you respawn. In this case here, you're not allowed to respawn. You have to get what's called medic. So somebody has to come up to you and then put their hands on you for essentially 10 seconds. And then you're revived, essentially, you're medicked, and you can go continue fighting. So I'm on the opposing team, which is the one that's trying to kill the president. And the whole goal is if you shoot the president once, he can be medicked once. If you shoot him again, he's dead. You can't do it twice, okay? Or if I go up and I touch the president, they're dead, okay? So that means I'm close enough to be able to do it. Well, I know they're starting at Bravo spawn, okay? And and we start a different spawn, and I literally run my ass off as fast as I can go. I have a grenade in my hand, and I run as fast as I can. I run. I'm sprinting through all these different parts of the maze, and I hear them, and I throw the grenade. And it lands and it kills the whole team. It was the shortest match ever. Being fit can help you in wartime situations as well, or simulated wartime situations. So well,
I will say, like, if we talk about what we do as a transferable skill, it sort of leads me into what we got up to in the gym over in Portland at the weekend. Now, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but the plan for our upcoming event in Belfast in September is basically for anybody who wants to compete in it, and you haven't mentioned that you're coming, so we'll talk about that another time. They want to submit their lifts in the Rogue lifting club, essentially. So there's a 500-pound club, 750, 1,000, 1,250, and 1,500. So I have my training block written out for that, but these are not lifts that I easily do. So it's your combination of your 1 rep max for bench press, your 1 rep max for deadlift, and 1 rep max for squat. Now, those 3 movements I do not do. Like, I'll only do a deadlift if I'm with you, or I'll only do a bench press if I see that somebody's doing it at an event, and I'll jump in whenever I know it's 225 and I know I can definitely do it. So I was like, right, I don't necessarily really care what my total score is in September, but I want to know that I've progressed. So on Sunday just past, myself, Randy, Todd, Mike, Andreas, and Justin went to test our 1 rep max. And I genuinely had no idea where I was in terms of these lifts. Like, yes, okay, I do dumbbell bench press, but it's not necessarily transferable. I do RDL, it's not necessarily transferable. So I want to get an idea because I want to know how much I progressed in September. So we went through everything. I got my total. I got my 1 rep maxes and I got my total. So for bench, my 1 rep max was 285. I think I could have done a little bit more, but 285 was the number I put up.
Very respectable. That's really good.
Squat 335 and deadlift 455. So the total was 1,075. Okay. So for a person that, yes, okay, I do train consistently, but not these movements, I think having a baseline of 1,075 is a pretty decent spot. So the goal is to make it to the 1250 club by September, which is 13. The event's 13 weeks today.
285, what was it?
335 and 455. My goal is to turn all of the
Finlandia too. Currently,
total.
Yeah,
1,075 pounds. So I'm already in the 1,000-pound club.
You're in a 1,000-pound club, but then there's the
1250 and 1,500.
Okay,
I think 1,500 is a stretch to do in 13 weeks, but 1,250 I think is more than manageable. So essentially, I have to add 175 pounds across all lifts in the next 12 to 15 weeks.
I don't think I wouldn't be in the 1,500 club. I would be short about 100 pounds or so on that
1,500,
one.
like I sat and tried to like calculate, because I was like, okay, well, if I add this to this and this to this, like where am I going to be at? Because 1,500 is big boy numbers, like on all lifts. It's not like, I think with 1,250 you can have one big lift and two mediocre lifts and still be able to hit it. So it was good to do it. It was good to just go through the movements. And like I said, I have a specific training program, and it was actually good because the way the training program's written out, it is based off percentages of 1 rep max. And I was just doing what I thought the couple of weeks before, but actually having the numbers now. Like today I went in and I was doing sets of 2 on bench press at 90% of 1 rep max, and I could just calculate it off the numbers that I had the weekend. So it gives me a slightly higher level of challenge because I actually have the numbers. So I'm excited to see what that looks like over the next 13 weeks or so. So yes, it's good to have those as a transferable skill, and I think, like I said, good to have a good baseline of where we're at and what the progress is going to look like.
It's awesome. You're going to get there, dude. I have no question about it. And it's always fun testing your 1 rep max. Like I do miss that to some extent. And maybe, after this training block and, we'll consider that again. But right now I'm enjoying the training.
I think what would work well, me knowing myself and me knowing you, was if we do this together. Yeah. Because I know I'm at least 11% stronger whenever I'm with you, just from a competitive nature. And I actually turned this into a competition. So I was speaking to Todd after. He had a respectable number 2. He was at I think 1,005 pounds total. So we're going to see who can progress the most between now and then, who gets the biggest percentage increase, and the loser has to spend 25 minutes in the ice bath. So stay tuned for what that looks like.
There's competition both ways. One, who wants to do that? So motivation to not do that, and then second is obviously the competition aspects, which is great. I think that definitely helps. I actually had a friend reach out recently and talk about that specific thing around like, hey, how do you continue your motivation, or like when do you decide enough is enough and you just stop and you go into maintenance? I'm like, man, maintenance isn't in my vocabulary. Like and it's not a knock on the individual. Like, it's just not something I think about. Like, I don't think about being done with where I'm at. I think about how do I get to the next level, to the next step, right? And eventually I'm going to plateau, just going to have to, but I'm still going to push myself, to try to continue to get over those barriers and to get better and all that other stuff. So that was an interesting concept because I never really thought about maintenance. Like, I don't know what that is, like.
Well, I will say, I do believe maintenance is underrated and underutilized because everybody either wants to get leaner or wants to get bigger. I'm not criticizing by any stretch because I've spent the past 10 years trying to do both of those things at the same time. But I do think there is value in programming specific maintenance periods based on what's going on in your life. And generally how I would look at it, say, for example, a client came to me and they said they've got, 4 weeks of travel or, 4 weeks of a shit show in work or a deadline in work or whatever. And I'm like, okay, right, for the next 4 weeks, because there's external factors at play here, the goal is just to maintain where you're at. So like just maintain, body weight, body composition, strength, whatever it is, or even if you're transitioning from being in a surplus to being in a deficit, like there will be a slight maintenance period within that to sort of just stabilize where you're at in terms of overall strength or overall like weight or body composition. So it's definitely something that I do utilize, but it's not something that I would think about long term. Like this, similar to you, like I'm not going, I'm finished. Like if I just get to this point and I just maintain this forever, I'll be happy, because it's just not in my nature. But it is a tool that I do use with clients often, depending on what's going on in their life. And it's good to be able to do it, because I think if you're honest about things, if you're honest with yourself about certain situations and you manage your expectations, and say, for example, somebody comes to me and it's July and they're like, look, July is a shit show because I'm 2 weeks vacation and 2 weeks travel for work. Like, okay, right, we're just going to do maintenance. There's no expectation for them to gain a massive amount of strength or lose a massive amount of weight, depending on what their goal is. They know the goal is just to maintain the level that they are at for that period of time.
Yeah, and the period of time, I think, does help put things into like a micro perspective, because it's very difficult for our minds to conceive 10 years from now. And think about it, like when you think about the universe, it's been here for like billions and billions and billions of years. Like we can't even fathom what that even.
We're gonna derail this whole conversation and talk about aliens, or where are we at?
The alien conversation next, and how probably awesome at lifting as well.
Yes.
But I mean, in general, like our concept of time is very difficult for us. We look at things, very near term, action objectives, things like that we can do task oriented right now. And I talked a little bit about the rule of 5 in a tweet recently, and I'm actually doing a blog post on it as well.
That'd be a good podcast for us today, for future us.
That's what I'm saying. And I'll touch the high level subject of it first, then we can do a podcast. I think would be good as well. But this is something that I created in my own mind because, so I'll tell you, like when I first started in this industry, I think things were hard, but it was very easy. And when I put in perspective of like, I was very focused on the technical stuff, right? I was writing tools. I was figuring out new research. I was writing exploits. I was, learning a very specific type of thing in cybersecurity. And my jobs were typically pretty easy in the sense that, hey, I was on an engagement. I had to do a pen test. I had to do this. I had to do an application security assessment, whatever. So, the tasking was there, and it was easy because I kind of had one thing to focus on. But when, you get later in your life or you get more responsibility and, you grow a family, you own several cybersecurity companies and other businesses, what was starting to happen with me is that I was having trouble with completing things or feeling like I accomplished something. I mean, I was still accomplishing things, but feeling like I was accomplishing something either that day or to my longer term objective goals that are down the road, right? And so I came up with this idea in my head called the rule of 5. And I stick to this just like I do lifting every day and everything else. And what I do is before I check my emails, before I get, inundated with the day, I come up with 5 things that I have to complete for that day. And the reason why I don't read my emails is because what the fires are of today is for today, right? But what is on my mind for 5 things that I need to accomplish that day that I either have been putting off, haven't done, or important for me to hit my goals for that day, that week, that month, that year or 2 years, or things that I can chip away with over time. So actually I use Google Keeps, and I literally go on my phone and I type out 5 things that I have to do for that day. And then I make sure I cross them off no matter what. It could be, simple things like going out for a 20-minute walk. That's one of the 5 things I have to do. It's for me. I need to go out there and experience the air, get myself away from the computer, the whatever. Or it could be, hey, I need to, flex my brain and code for a little bit just so I keep sharp with my technical skills. Or, it might be, hey, I have to, write this specific email to this person that I forgot to write, last week. That's important for me, or it's reaching out to somebody I haven't talked to in a long time. But there are 5 things that I have to do every single day. And that's really helped me out with feeling like I'm accomplished at that day. Like I've actually accomplished something. Because what would happen is I'd be like on these calls all day, and I would just be back to back to where I couldn't even like eat or drink, or use the bathrooms. And then I'd be like, what did I actually do today? Like, I don't think I did anything. I didn't accomplish anything. I was just talking the entire time. So, the rule of 5 is something that seemed to resonate with a lot of people when I tweeted about it. And it's something cool that you can do, to have tasks that you can complete during the day, knowing you actually completed something or did something.
Well, my question is, do you send me a message before you write the rule of 5, or do you do that?
First.
Okay, that's okay. Just as long as you. I think that's a good. Again, we'll talk about transferable skills. Like, I think sometimes whenever it comes to your training on the whole or progress on the whole, it's difficult to see the progress like day to day, and it can get frustrating because you feel like you're putting a lot of work in. You go to the gym, you're tracking your food, you're doing your cardio, you're doing the steps, etc., etc., etc. So it's like, am I actually doing anything week on week, month on month, whatever it is? But if you have a list of non-negotiables, this is what the term that I use whenever we onboard with clients. If they're like, okay, right, you have to get X amount of steps per day, eat X amount of calories, do X amount of training, whatever it is. If you have those things and you know you tick them off, you can have the confidence in yourself and your ability, and I guess me, in the progress, that over time you will make a change. It's not like, say for example, the first day you completed your check-in sheet on the 10th of September 2020, you didn't wake up the next day and be like, okay, right, well, that's me done. Like, I've seen the progress. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't that instant, but it was like, okay, right, if I do this for weeks and months and then now obviously years, you've obviously been able to see the progress because you've consistently done those things day in, day out, week in, week out over time.
Yeah. And so this just brings up the point of today and our topic for today. So I had a friend reach out to me and she just asked me a question around how do, I've been doing well, I've been doing a great job with my health, and how do I, ensure consistency, or how do I ensure that I'm actually making progress? And it's interesting because, I've mentioned the podcast before. This is one of my biggest fears is that, I put all this time and effort in and I go to the gym and I eat right. I do this stuff, but then I look the exact same as I did the year before. Right. And it's very difficult for our minds to not recognize the flaws that we have. You see these influencers online that have, these perfect physiques and all this other stuff. Like, well, why don't I look like that? It's really easy to get consumed with that and not look at some of your both near-term, mid-term, and long-term goals that you have and how you want to get there. I will tell you, every single person here that's listening, you are your biggest critic, period. You will judge everything about you that is not right. For me, I have this little, blotch of redness right here, that no one probably notices, but I do. I have, surgical marks for when I had surgery on my stomach, right? And I'm sure everybody notices that when I have my shirt off and they're like, oh my God, look at that dude with the surgical marks on there, right? No one gives a shit about the surgical marks that are on there, but that's how we think, especially, if you've come from being obese or, obviously, Ben on your side, extremely skinny, we have these perceptions of ourselves that we're still that same person. And I have the same as well. Like, I still look at me as Big Dave in the sense of Fat Dave. Whenever I sit down and I have a little bit of pouch, hanging over here, and it's funny because like, if you look at here, I can barely even pull anything from here. There's nothing there. But yet when I sit down, I can see that there's something there, right? I go back to I'm Fat Dave again. Or, the crazy part is shirts. I am the most anal person about shirts. If a shirt makes me look big or overweight, I freak out and I won't wear them. So most shirts, you always see me probably on the podcast wearing Noble shirts. It's not because it makes me look big. It's that it doesn't make me look fat. And because I had this stipulation of when I was fat, wearing baggy clothes all the time to hide how big I was. So if I get a large or an extra large just from a normal shirt, there's a 99% chance that I'm not gonna wear that shirt ever. Because maybe it's not cut, long enough. So, if because I'm a tall person, maybe if I move my hands up, someone would see my stomach and I'm embarrassed of my stomach, or, it's too baggy. So, people are going to think I'm trying to hide being, again, it's the stupidest things ever, but we have these stigmas with us that pretty much live with us for the rest of our lives. So the question today is, how do you track progress, that may not be visible or apparent to you, but is probably for others? Or how do we track it ourselves to make sure that we're making the right things? We've talked about this before. We've had a couple podcasts on tracking progress and things like that. So we're going to recap some of those. But I think it's important to add the context of you're never going to be happy with where you are. I'm not happy where I'm at today. I want to continue to grow. I continue wanting to get bigger. I want to keep pushing weight. I continue to, I want bigger bicep arms. I always think in my mind, I'm like, can people tell that I really I lift, am I not yesterday at airsoft, I did an underhand grenade toss. Okay. Because that's, you're not allowed to do overhand. And one of the refs is like, hey, Dave, you're not allowed to do an overhand, grenade toss. And the guy next to me is like, dude, I'm sitting right here. He did it underhand, but he's so friggin' big. It probably looked like he was mauling it at somebody. I was like, oh, thanks, man. That's cool. That's nice of you. I appreciate that. I even told Aaron more. I'm like, he said, as a big guy. So, it's like, this is great, but I'm like, people actually notice that. Cool. But I don't, because, I look at my arms and I'm like, well, they're not as big as Ronnie Coleman, and so it's the things that
That's
we
a
tell
good comparison. You versus one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time and the size of their arms. Like, yeah.
but I think it's important to discuss, and I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on this too, Ben. Based on where you came from, because you'd mentioned the other podcast. Was it last week around how somebody was like, "Well, you got Big Ben over here," or somebody has Big Ben. You're like, "Oh, thank you," because you're used to being small Ben when you were younger.
Yeah, and I genuinely do still believe that in myself. And like, if we talk about arms, like I often look at myself, I'm like, my arms are so fucking skinny. And if I then see a picture of myself 10 years ago, I'm like, oh no, that is what it looks like for me to have skinny arms. And I think it's just the biggest problem that I see with clients is them not seeing it in themselves. Especially quite early on. So if we talk about like the first 6 months, essentially, I always see a lot of frustration and like, again, putting the work in. And yes, okay, they're seeing metrics move and they're seeing numbers move on a spreadsheet and like, okay, right, my weight's down or my measurements are down or I'm stronger or whatever. But they look at themselves every single day. And as you said, they will stand and like nitpick the quote unquote worst bits or the bits that they sort of their least favorite bits about themselves, and they don't see the progress. And it's generally the people around them that will see it first. I always say it's like the people that you don't really see very often. So, say conferences is a good example. You say you're at a conference and it's you see these people every sort of 4, 5, 6 months. They'll be the people that notice it first because they have had a time away from you and they will see the change. Then the people who are sort of closer to you, so like your friends that you see on a regular basis or your family, they'll notice it because they don't necessarily look at you the same way that you look at yourself. And then you'll be the last person to notice it, which is frustrating as fuck. But it's just that, like, that's just the way it is. And it's the like constant seeing yourself and sort of nitpicking as you go along. And like I said, like I've said this time and time again, for me, the goal whenever I started training was I just wanted to fill out my t-shirts. And it was like, where your shoulder sits here.
Yeah.
And there's an irony here because I'm wearing an oversized t-shirt, but I always wanted it just to sit like where your shoulder was supposed to. It was always like hanging down, like, halfway down in almost into my tricep. I was like, I just want to fit them. Now, I used to wear a medium. I'm pretty sure this is a double XL, and I just wear my t-shirts differently now, but it was always like I wanted to grow into those t-shirts. As it's happened, I've just always gotten bigger and bigger and bigger t-shirts with the aim to always continue to grow and fill them out. But it is something that is like, you're never happy with the progress. But I think a book that Sean recommended to me, it's called The Gap and the Gain. I don't know who it's by. And they talk about, instead of focusing on the gap as to like where you are now versus where you see yourself and you want to go, focus on the gain as to where you have come from to where you are now. And I think that that's often a good perspective, because I will always want to be bigger. I will always want to be leaner. But I often think back, like, I'm, I don't know, 50, 60 pounds heavier now than I was back then. So like, I can't deny that there has been progress made. Like, I cannot deny that there has been progress made, but still I will nitpick and go, well, my arms aren't really that big, or, my arms aren't as big as Dave's. And I have everybody's measurements. I'm like, well, my measurements aren't that big and my arms, what the fuck? Like, I've been doing this for 10 years. So I do have that comparison with him as well.
So first of all, I just want to throw a caveat. If you're watching a live stream, yes, I am eating French fries. Yes, I have the calories for them. At the end of the day, calories and calories out, probably the best thing to be eating on a hacking your health.
# health and fitness
podcast. But I'm pounding some Arby's really quick just to get some calories in, because I need my calories and I'm behind. So don't judge. I'm still going to get my 250, 260 grams of protein, and I'm going to get in the 3,400 calories I'm supposed to be eating every day, and go from there. So, but exactly what you said. And, I think we get in our own heads of where we're at, what our accomplishments are. And we also look at the progress of other people. And we say, well, they did it, but also they're probably 10 years ahead of very specific training to get them to that point to where they're, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And that's the thing that I think we all struggle with personally, is that transformations really do take a lot of time, but you look great in comparison to what you did before. And you look great, and you probably look the best you ever have in the comparison to your whole life. And so you have to take it in various different stages and put it in perspective. And again, somebody that looks at you doesn't look at you the way that you look at yourself. And I think about this all the time. If I see somebody that is extremely overweight, my first thought of them is like, oh my God, they're overweight. And my first thought is like, I wish I could talk to them to help them. Right. Because they're obviously struggling. And maybe they're fine. Maybe they're happy the way they are. And that's perfectly fine too. You can, you live your own life the way you want to. That's perfectly fine. But, when I see somebody though, that is a relatively normal build, I don't, let's just say they take their shirt off. I'm not going to be like, oh, that guy is like, his right, pectoral muscle is, bigger than his left. And, he looks like this or does this or has, some excess body fat. Like our brains don't interpret other people to that myopic focus. So, when you look at somebody, it's a very quick glance, and it's actually interesting. I think we talked a little bit about this on the last podcast, but the first thing that we typically notice is the shoulders of somebody. From there, it goes to the arms, then to the chest, and then, typically to the back. And so, people are all looking for that V taper look. The shoulders give you the V taper as you go through. And even for women, when you get more defined around the shoulders, seeing, the definition in the shoulders are the first thing that people typically look at, again, when they're looking at somebody as you go along. So when you're looking at tracking progress, it's not necessarily how you look at yourself and not seeing the difference. It's, hey, can we put actual stats to this so that your brain knows you're making progress and that you're making progress, so you at least keep sane as you're going through this process, right? And, Ben's system definitely does that. So, and you can do this obviously, in your own home as well. But, if you look at my week 1 photos to where I'm at today, the changes are astronomical. It's not even close to what it was week 1 to what it is today, right? But that's 3.5 years of putting in some intense consistency, right? So the things that we often look at, is going to be weight, right? But we'll talk a little about that because there's a lot of gotchas in that. And then there's the measurements and then the progress photos. Those are the 3, I think, core things that you can do to ensure that you're continuously making progress. Now, the progress photos are going to be your slowest to notice because you're going to judge everything about you. But over a span,
as a caveat to that, progress photos are the most unflattering. Like, people like, I don't like my photos. I don't like my progress photos either, because you just stood there and it's like first thing in the morning, you've got like one eye still stuck closed and you're just standing there. Like, you just like stand there in your shorts or whatever. Like, you're not looking at them going, I'm not hitting any like back, double bicep. I'm not hitting any poses or anything. Like, I'm just literally stood there as like that. This is me as I wake up in the morning. So it's like, nobody's like, oh my God, I really love my progress photos. Well, you did this morning, and rightly so.
It's rare. Normally, like when I get in front of the thing, I'm like, man, this could be the best progress photo. I'm looking at myself in the mirror. I'm like, this looks great. And I look at the photo. I'm like, shit, this looks horrible. Like, what am I doing? I can't use any of these. I can't show this to Ben. But
But I think that the other thing is like the comparison thing, and I'm not saying that I use other people as a comparison, but it obviously happens. And one thing that Ali Gilbert was on the experts call on Thursday, and she was just sort of giving some statistics. She was talking about hormone replacement therapy and just men's health in general, and she was talking about how the world has changed to the people who are in shape are actually the people that aren't quote unquote normal. So it's like it's normalized people being out of shape essentially. So even if the fact that you're someone who looks after yourself, I would imagine if you're listening to this, you're probably someone who trains. Like, you're already leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of the population just by actually giving a shit about how you look and feel and actually making the progress. So it's like, recognize the sort of broad spectrum of types of people that they are, and understand that you, in terms of your health and fitness, are far beyond many other people who necessarily don't have the tools or the knowledge.
Yep, for sure. And again, our own worst critics when it comes to that.
Yeah.
So the progress photos are good for a long-term comparison. So like, hey, going back 6 months to now, what are the differences? And you may not even recognize them, but somebody that you give them to, like if it's a trainer, for example, or just say your spouse or significant other, they're like, oh my God, look at that. You can see this and this and this and this and this different and this different. Like, we can see the differences. Trust me, there's differences there. The second thing is on the measurements. Measurements are probably the number one most consistent thing that cannot lie to you. They cannot lie to you. Measurements do not lie in any way, shape, or form. So if you're taking measurements of your waist, of your hips, of your legs, your quads, of your arms, of your neck, of your calves, unfortunately, those definitely don't lie. These are things that will give you consistent results that, hey, I'm making progress. So if you're seeing a shrink in the waist, you're seeing a shrink in the hips, guess what? You're losing fat, right? There's no other way around it. Like, measurements just don't magically shrink themselves, your body is making a change. So if those numbers even going down 0.1 or 0.2 centimeters, you're making a difference as it goes along. And it may not be that drastic week over week, but let's just say you're doing 0.5 centimeters a week, or 0.3. You couple that with 3 months, 6 months, a year, that's a pretty substantial change in the amount of centimeters of circumference of your waistline. So these, again, are all small changes as you go through. So if you're noticing, hey, stomach's going down, hips going down, but my legs have grown, well, guess what? Now we know we're gaining muscle mass. So you're losing body fat and you're gaining muscle mass. What you're doing is working. Now, is there ways to optimize? Sure. Are there ways to get that 1% more out of it? Sure. But what you're doing is working. Now, how do I build upon that and keep it going, right? And it's those changes and deviations. So let's just say, you're in a weight loss journey and, you drop 40 pounds. Well, you're going to have to change your calories because you're 40 pounds less in weight, right? So if you're not getting the desired results in the measurements, well, you need to make some changes, right? It's not going to be the same thing day in and day out, and your progress in your journey is never stopped. You're never at your destination. You're continuously trying to get to a different destination. So you have to change as you progress. Now, the scale itself is a great measurement coupled with the measurements, right? So if you are not losing on the scale, but your measurements are showing my waist is down, and let's just say my biceps are up or my arms are up, well, we know that that's muscle mass, right? And muscle mass is going to be, is going to continuously put on, weight as well. So you may not lose as much or as fast as you can go. Or it may mean if you're not on the scale and you're not dropping what you need to lower your calories a little bit more to make sure that you lose the weight that you want to. And, again, I caution you on the weight loss side, don't ever drop down too much because one, you're going to feel like shit. And two, you're going to lose a ton of muscle mass. If you look at the main issue that's going on with Ozempic right now, the GLP-1 agonist that, has been the big weight loss fans, those Moderna and Wegovy and, Ozempic and those ones, they're GLP-1 agonists that tell your brain that you're no longer hungry. It's the signal that's sent from your stomach up to your brain to say, hey, I'm full, stop eating. And so these GLP-1 agonists have a long shelf life. Usually it's about a week. And it continuously is sending signals real time to your brain saying, don't eat, don't eat, don't eat, don't eat. So what you do is it removes the cravings and hunger, which may sound amazing. And it is. It's probably one of the biggest weight loss drugs that has come out in our generation. But there's a drawback to that is you're probably not getting adequate protein amounts. What they found with the data studies with Ozempic is that if you're in a large calorie deficit because you're not eating, you also drop a proportionate amount of muscle mass as well. So that's not what you want to have happen. Bone density, muscle mass, grip strength are leading indicators of longevity. If you're losing muscle mass, it's first of all, it's very difficult to gain that back. It's a slow process to gain that back. And two, it's counterproductive to your health. So, as you're dropping down in calories, you want to be very, very specific with that and do a slight amount of calorie deficit so that your body still needs to burn the fat, but it's not burning too much so you feel like crap and you're dropping muscle mass as part of it. Your body will eat muscle like it's no tomorrow for calories. It just does, right? It's and it makes sense if you're starving, and you run out of fat. Well, that's your easiest source of one-to-one conversions for energy production in your body. So it doesn't prefer to get rid of that. It wants to keep that as much as possible because that's used for rainy days when, we may be dying and we need extra energy. It doesn't realize that we have DoorDash and Uber Eats. Our body's not that smart. It's like, hey, bro, I'm not going to starve. Trust me. I could literally get 5,000 calories right now dropped and I can pound that. I can pound a whole pizza right now. Just, can you just get rid of this body fat from me? We're going to be good for food forever. Trust me. But the counterpoint of that is that, it will burn muscle mass if you're not using it. And if you don't have adequate amount of protein, it just moves it away. It doesn't rebuild stronger. It digresses.
Yeah. And I think first establishing, if we're talking about how to monitor progress over time, establish what the goal is. Obviously a good metric for monitoring sort of muscle mass and strength is just the level that your training's at. So if you come down too far in a deficit and you're seeing significant drops in terms of strength, it's probably worth, and sometimes actually trying out with a few clients at the minute is like worth almost cycling, being in a deficit and being at maintenance. So a couple of clients I have at the minute, they're doing 4 weeks at maintenance and 2 weeks, 4 weeks in a deficit and 2 weeks of maintenance, just so they don't go to that like super low calories for an extended period of time. And as you said, then the body starts to utilize muscle mass that you spent essentially forever trying to build. So it's like ways that you can do that. You're not sort of continuously in a deficit forever, because your body, as we said before, will start to sort of shut down other functions that I guess are necessary. Well, not necessary, but beneficial to have for sort of day-to-day life. But if we think about other metrics, and again, to sort of touch on the stuff from the podcast last week and other sort of health data markers that we're going to focus on, one of the biggest things over the past 2 or 3 years that I've noticed is not everybody's so concerned about, or they're not at least primarily concerned about their body composition. They come because they want to be healthier and live for longer. Now, obviously, training and building muscle and losing body fat will aid in that. But if they talk about health, they're talking about like their blood pressure or their rest and heart rate or their ability to manage stress or whatever it is. So looking at a slightly deeper level, if your goal isn't necessarily just like physical and appearance and vanity, which some people are shy to admit, but when people come on the call and they're like, I just want to look and feel better, like I want to look good with my clothes off, I'm like, fucking right, at least you're honest, because that's the truth. But somebody will have had, potentially a health scare or something, a doctor, or they need to make change, or whether it's pre-diabetic or whatever. All of these other things that we can look at. And again, this is why my check-in sheet's so extensive, because it can get frustrating if you go 3 or 4 weeks and metrics aren't moving or weight's not moving or whatever. And I'm like, okay, right. But if you look at this, you're stronger, or your rest and heart rate has come down, or insert whatever the thing is. There's other things you can look at to make sure you're progressing. It's not necessarily always just the number on the scale or the number on the tape or whatever it is. And a good one from from the vanity perspective and the body composition perspective is the clothes that you wear, because scale's a shit show, as we know. But if you put the same shirt on that you wear every week and it fits slightly different, unless you've got a problem with the person that does your laundry, like generally the shirt's going to be the same size and it's going to tell a different story. So like I said, if the shoulders fit differently or the arms a little bit tighter, it sits differently around your chest. Like one of the biggest things that I've heard clients say is, they go from the shirt sort of coming out around the gut area to it coming in and it's sort of hanging down over the chest area. Like as a male, that is what you want. Like you want your sort of chest to be pronounced. So those things in terms of how your clothes fit is another good marker of progress over time too.
Clothes fit indication, I hear commonly from people, right? You're like, oh, my clothes fit better. But then they'll say to me at the same time, they're like, well, I haven't dropped on the scale. I'm like,
but my weight hasn't changed. That's literally it. It's like, I've dropped, I needed to buy a new belt because my belt doesn't fit anymore, or my shirts are fitting much better, but the scale hasn't went. I'm like, can we just get rid of the scale hasn't went? Like, fuck the scale. Like, there's so many things that can impact that. Like, if you're feeling better, you're stronger, and your clothes fit differently, like you're making progress, whether you like it or not. Like that is the long and short of it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what made a difference for me that really, like I was like, oh, okay, is I went to go put a suit on. This is, it was like during COVID, and I was just trying to make my gains, and I went to go put a suit on, and for one, it was like extremely baggy in the stomach area, but also I couldn't get my shoulders through, so I was like this, because my shoulders had gotten so much wider. I'm like, oh yeah, there's a difference,
I was actually laughing at this with my mum the other day because Alex, my younger brother, has been training, and it was fun. Like we don't wear suits that often. We're either going to a wedding or a funeral. It's literally the only times that we'll ever wear a suit. And mum was laughing, like that has been my journey. Like I will have had to buy a suit at least once a year because I will only ever need to wear it once a year. Like, oh, I've got that suit upstairs, not going to put it on. I'm like this, stuck in it. I'm like, well, nope, this one's not going to do. I have to go and get a new one.
That's the greatest feeling ever, though, because you are making progress. It's progress. It's tangible. And again, we are our own worst critics in all of this. So, for those that are listening on the podcast, believe me, like you are making progress and change. If you're going out and being consistent, you're continuously taxing your body, you're eating correctly, and you're being consistent with it, you are going to see changes. And it's going to be some of them drastic. We call them the newbie gains, right? You get the newbie gains, which is a drastic change very quickly. And after that, it kind of slows down a little bit. I'm definitely not making as much progress as I did when I first started lifting. I think I went from 135 pound, deadlift to 350 in a couple months. It's not going to be that quick. It's not going to happen. But, we are still making progress, and that's what you want to continuously see. It's funny because I remember just the other day I I skimpied a little bit on check-in, and I didn't put my measurements in. And Ben's first response was, well, I don't know the full picture of everything that's going on because I don't have your measurements. And that's true because, like my weight was fluctuating a little bit and it was fluctuating on the upward side, but is it that I'm gaining fat? Is it that I'm gaining muscle? What do my measurements tell me that's going on? I can't base upping your calories or doing this based off of just your weight. I need to understand what is the calories doing to, your adjustments in your physique and things like that in order for me to conclude to go down or up in either way. So it's that full picture that is really important, to be able to paint and just for your own mental sanity, that you're still continuously making progress as you go along. And then from there, you can obviously start stacking supplements in, if you want to get 0.1% better because you're doing fish oils and creatine and things like that. No more on the fish oils, by the way. I'm off of that.
Okay,
We're good.
Okay,
so,
good. We've settled the case for now.
Yeah, the case is settled. Verdict is in. Fish oils, still good. Just don't do too much. But, those are the tangibles that we can look at to make ourselves sane. So, for those that are saying, hey, I'm not making progress, again, you're running too hard on your own.
And I will say this, be honest with yourself, because we can tell you all the metrics of progress and you're like, well, you know what, I'm still not making progress. I'm like, well, you know what, maybe you're not actually being consistent as you think you are. Maybe you're not tracking your food accurately. Maybe you're having one day where you're eating like a total asshole and throwing everything off. Maybe you're not training as hard as you could be. Like, all these things can also be true. Like, we've said this before, like, we don't ever want to be the people in any year's time are still doing the same stuff or looking the same way, but we know how to monitor progress over time. We know that we're continuing to push in terms of progress. If you're someone who goes to the gym and does the same amount of sets and the same amount of reps and the same amount of weight and the same amount of cardio and eats the same amount of calories, while I would much prefer you to be the person that is going to the gym and doing the thing than not, if you're not pushing, you're not trying to be better in all of those things or doing more of less of, whether it's cardio or eating less in terms of calories, if that's your goal, like, be honest with yourself in terms of your tracking. And I've seen this time and time again, even with you, even with me, you get complacent in it. You're like, well, no, I know how to track food. Like, I know what I'm eating. I don't actually need to track it. Like, I know. Whereas whenever you actually come back to doing it, you're like, oh shit, I was way off. So you're not actually being as consistent as you want. And if you really want to make the progress and you're so hell-bent on making as much progress as you can, you really need to nail these things down. Like, yes, you can make decent amount of progress, not being super anal about all the things. But if you're frustrated about the progress that you're quote unquote not making, then you really need to double down on making sure you're actually doing the stuff that you're saying you're doing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, you heard it here first, everybody.
Yes.
Let's get good topics this week. We hit a lot of different things, all the way from, paintball to,
I'm just hoping that I'm going to get, like, my thought process on the 1 rep max test is, I think that I can still get the newbie gains in these lifts. I realize I've been training for a long time, but not these lifts specifically. So if I really dial in my form, I have a mobility program around them. I'm going to be testing these things. Like, I've never done the rep ranges of like 2 to 4. So I'm hoping over the next 13 weeks I can make pretty decent progress. So I'm excited for that. I'll share obviously the journey as we go, because it's not a way that I have trained before. I'm like, yeah. I lifted the 455 deadlift and I was like, fucking hell. 600 so far away, so far away. But again, that's something
it's
that
not, it's really not.
It is and it isn't. It is because it's an additional 150 pounds, but that's something you actively trained for a long time. Do you know what I mean? And that was specific around your training. So
there's no way I'd be able to do 600 right now, unless, again, I train for it.
Would you be pissed if I, in September, pull like 615 or something?
Yeah, then I would train to beat you. There's no question. Like, that would be done. Like, that, there's no discussion. I would execute.
Well, but, hey, I guess we'll find out in the next couple of months.
Guess we'll find out. I'm looking forward to it. Well, hey, everybody, thanks for joining this week's podcast. I thought it was a good one. And we'll catch you same time, same place next week. Same time?
Same time, same place. Same time, same place. Same time, same place. Same place. Same time.
Hey, everybody, this is Insanity from...
Right, over and out. Thanks for listening. See you in a bit.
Yeah.